Arthur Stone's diner was days away from being seized. Bills piled high, neighbors mocked him, and still, he kept feeding strangers who walked through his door. One night, he gave his very last plate of food to a trembling homeless man, ignoring whispers that kindness was the reason he was broke. But when officers arrived to shut his diner down, black SUVs pulled up outside, and the same man everyone thought was a nobody stepped out dressed in a suit that made the whole street go silent. Arthur Stone's diner looked like a place time had almost forgotten. A chipped neon sign buzzed weakly over the door, fighting against the drizzle of rain that had soaked the streets all afternoon. Inside, the smell of fried onions and strong coffee clung to the air, mixing with the faint dampness that always slipped in when the door opened. The booths were empty, just cracked red vinyl seats, a few crumbs left behind from the morning's customers, and the low hum of an ancient refrigerator in the back. Arthur stood behind the counter, shoulders slightly slumped, wiping down the same spot with a rag that had long since lost its color. He wasn't polishing for cleanliness anymore. He was polishing to think, to distract himself from the stack of bills in the office drawer he hadn't opened in 2 days. People said he was too generous for his own good. And maybe he was. Every evening, someone hungry wandered in. Sometimes an old woman, sometimes kids with hollow eyes, sometimes men whose shoes were falling apart at the seams. Arthur never turned them away. He'd slide a plate across the counter, no questions asked. It wasn't charity to him. It was survival. "If I can cook, they can eat," he always muttered under his breath. That night, the bell over the door jingled softly. A figure stepped inside, thin, soaked, his coat hanging like a second skin. The man's beard was patchy, his eyes sunk deep, and his hands trembled as if the cold had crept all the way into his bones. Arthur didn't hesitate. He gestured toward the nearest booth. "Sit down, brother. You're freezing." The man didn't answer, just shuffled forward. He smelled faintly of rainwater and the kind of exhaustion that clung after too many nights on concrete sidewalks. Arthur poured him a mug of hot coffee, set down a steaming bowl of chicken soup, and slid over a couple of painkillers from the jar he kept near the register. From the corner booth, 2 locals whispered loud enough for Arthur to hear. "See, that's why he's broke," one muttered, giving away food to every stray that walks in. The other snorted. "He'll lose this place before winter's done." Arthur's jaw tightened. He caught their reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine, but didn't turn around. He wasn't about to defend himself. What was the point? Let them think he was foolish. Instead, he focused on the man in front of him. The stranger sipped slowly, watching Arthur with a strange stillness, like he was studying more than just the food. Every movement of Arthur's hand, the way he tucked the rag into his apron, the way he leaned forward with concern, was met with an intent gaze. And though Arthur didn't know it, that gaze carried more weight than the gossip at the booth ever could. The rain outside tapped harder against the window. Arthur rubbed his tired eyes, unaware that the night had just written the first line of a chapter that would change his life forever. Morning light spilled through the diner's fogged windows, streaked with dust, where Arthur hadn't found time to wipe. The tables sat mostly empty, just a couple of regulars sipping coffee, their voices carrying louder than they probably realized. "Poor man's too soft," one said, stirring sugar into his cup. "Soft," the other scoffed. "It's stupidity. You don't give away food when you can't even pay rent." Both of them chuckled, shaking their heads as if Arthur were nothing more than a cautionary tale playing out in real time. Arthur pretended not to hear. He moved behind the counter with deliberate calm, refilling the salt shakers, adjusting napkin holders, anything to keep his hands busy. His apron was frayed at the edges, and a thin crease of sweat sat on his brow despite the chill of the morning. But he felt their words. They weighed heavier than the stack of overdue invoices sitting in his office drawer. By mid-afternoon, the stranger returned. Same ragged coat, same quiet steps. Arthur looked up from the grill and nodded toward a booth, without hesitation. The man lowered himself onto the seat, his movement slow, like his body resisted every bend. "You again," Arthur said softly, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of him.
"Eat."
No arguments. The man's hand shook slightly as he picked up the fork. He didn't speak much anyway, but his eyes never left Arthur. They followed him as he wiped down counters, greeted the rare customer, and checked the old clock above the door as if time itself were moving too fast for him to catch up. Word around the neighborhood spread quickly. Arthur's generosity wasn't seen as noble anymore. It was seen as weakness. Suppliers started to cut him off. One delivery truck never showed, and when he called, the answer was curt: "Pay what you owe first." That evening, when Arthur stepped outside to toss the trash, two neighbors leaned against the lamppost. "Man's drowning himself," one muttered. "Don't feel sorry for him," the other replied. "He chose this life. You can't feed everyone." Arthur paused, trash bag in hand, their words echoing in his head. For a flicker of a moment, he wondered if they were right. But then he pictured the faces of the people he'd served, the tired mothers, the hungry children, the silent man inside eating as though it was the first real meal in days. And the doubt passed like a shadow. Inside, the diner lights buzzed faintly. Arthur leaned on the counter, exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. He didn't see it, but the stranger's eyes softened, as though he recognized something in Arthur's weariness, something rare. The whispers kept growing outside, but Arthur kept showing up each day. And the man kept coming back, always silent, always watching. The weeks stretched on like a rope about to snap. By Tuesday, Arthur was serving meals out of ingredients he scraped together from whatever was left in his pantry: a half bag of rice, a few onions, a crate of bruised tomatoes he bought cheap from a vendor who felt sorry for him. He stirred pots with a heavy hand, hiding the tightness in his chest every time he thought about the ledger in his drawer. On Thursday morning, the mail arrived, a thick envelope stamped in bold red letters. Arthur sat at the counter, thumb tracing the edge of the seal, heart pounding. He didn't have to open it, he already knew. When he finally tore it open, the words confirmed his fear: foreclosure. Unless the debt was paid, the restaurant would be seized within days. That evening, the diner was quieter than usual. Just the hum of the fridge and the clink of the stranger's spoon against a chipped bowl. Arthur sat across from him this time. Two drained men. The man ate slowly, eyes on Arthur. And for a moment, Arthur thought he might actually speak, but no words came, just that same steady, unreadable stare. The following morning, the end arrived. Two uniformed officers pushed through the diner's door, papers in hand. Behind them trailed a man in a suit carrying a clipboard, eyes darting around the room like a vulture spotting carrion. "Mr. Stone?" one officer asked. Arthur nodded, though his throat felt like sandpaper. They explained in cold, official tones. The diner was being repossessed. He had until the end of the day to vacate. Customers, what few there were, watched from the booths. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Told you he couldn't last." All that free food finally caught up to him. Arthur stood still, gripping the counter's edge so tightly his knuckles whitened. He could feel every set of eyes burning into his back, but he didn't argue. What was there to say? And then tires screeched softly against the curb. A line of black SUVs rolled up outside the diner, engines purring like a threat. Heads turned, conversations froze mid-sentence. The officers at the door stiffened, unsure of what to expect. The door swung open. From the first SUV stepped the same man who had shuffled into Arthur's diner night after night. Only this time, the ragged coat was gone. In its place was a tailored suit, pressed sharp, gleaming in the morning sun. His beard was neatly trimmed, his posture straight, his presence commanding. Behind him, assistants carried thick folders and briefcases. The diner fell silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the officers didn't speak. The man walked forward, each step deliberate, his gaze fixed on Arthur. Arthur's chest rose and fell, his breath shallow, as the truth began to take shape in his mind. The man wasn't who he claimed to be, and the revelation about to come would be bigger than Arthur or anyone in that room could have imagined. The diner felt frozen in time. Even the hum of the fridge seemed to fade as the man in the suit, Mr. Sterling, stepped fully inside. His shoes tapped against the worn floorboards, the sound echoing louder than it should have in the cramped space. Arthur's hands dropped from the counter. His rag, always in his grip, slipped quietly to the floor. Mr. Sterling stopped a foot away. He studied Arthur's face for a long moment, then placed a thick folder on the counter between them. His voice was calm, measured, but carried an authority that silenced the room. "Mr. Stone, these are the deeds. This building, this diner, it's yours now. Paid in full. Every debt cleared." Gasps rippled through the customers. The officers shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they were even needed anymore. Arthur blinked, trying to process the words. He shook his head slightly as though refusing to believe what his ears told him. I don't understand." The man straightened his shoulders. "You gave me food when I had nothing. You gave without asking, without judgment. You did it again and again, even when people told you it would ruin you. I wanted to see if that was who you really were or if it was just habit, so I dressed like this." He gestured to the memory of his ragged disguise. "I tested you, and you passed in ways I never expected." A murmur swept through the diner. The same neighbors who mocked Arthur days before now stared wide-eyed, some with shame heating their cheeks. The billionaire continued, "I'm investing in this neighborhood, and I've been watching you longer than you realize. You're not just a restaurant owner, Arthur. You're the heartbeat of this place. And men like you don't deserve to sink. They deserve to rise." He pushed the folder closer. "Not only is this diner yours free and clear, but I want to expand it. Fund new locations. Spread your vision. If you let me, I'll back you every step." Arthur's throat tightened. His hands hovered over the papers, trembling. The whispers in the diner shifted, no longer mocking, but reverent. "Can you believe it? He was right all along. Kindness does come back." Tears welled in Arthur's eyes, though he tried to blink them away. He reached for the folder, pressing his palm flat against it, grounding himself in the reality that this wasn't a dream. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the cracked neon sign. For the first time in months, Arthur felt its warmth. And though his life had just changed in ways he could never have imagined, he knew one thing would remain the same. Tomorrow morning, when the doors opened, anyone hungry would still have a place at his table, because in the end, that was what had saved him. Arthur's kindness nearly cost him everything, but in the end, it became the very reason he was saved.